All right. I am so excited to have another client who wanted to come and talk to you guys. And this is super fun because she has a little bit of a different story than a lot of my clients. So I'm really excited. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast to share your story today. And I would like you to just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about you.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Jolene, for having me. I'm so excited. My name is Ghazal, and I am originally from Pakistan, and I am Muslim, which has been very interesting being on this group because I know most people here are not Muslim, but I've never felt like an outsider because of that. I actually feel like there's so much that we relate, and there's a lot of different things that we have in common. Yeah, that's me. I am 25 years old. I am a medical student and I love Jolene.
You're so cute. One thing that I love, well, first of all, I love that you're in med. I do give her a hard time. I'm like, as soon as you become a doctor, then I'm going to need all the help we can possibly get. I'm always trying to ask her medical questions on our coaching calls. But one thing that I love about your story, one, I love that you are Muslim. You're not the only Muslim that we have in the group, which I love. And I think it's so fascinating because there is so much that correlates, even though we're not of the same religion. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about you is that you and your boyfriend are not married yet, which I love because there are so many women who struggle with this in their relationship. Their partner of whatever that is, fiance, boyfriend, husband, is struggling with this, and they're struggling with it. And if they're not married yet, then often the thought is like, maybe this isn't affecting me yet, or maybe I'm making too big a deal of it. And I remember doing a consultation with you, and you bring that up. You're like, well, we're not married yet, but like, is that still something you can help me with? And I was like, yes, come now before you get married. Like, let's start working through this before you actually just because if you do decide to get married, then a lot of times it just pushes it further down the road if you haven't actually dealt with it yet, and it is still affecting you. So no matter what type of relationship you're in, it can affect you. So I love that about you. And I'm just like, I admire that so much because I don't know, like knowing who I was in college, dating my husband, if he had told me at the time that this is what he was struggling with, I don't think I would have sought help for myself. In fact, I know I wouldn't have because I didn't even when he told me and we were married. So I just have to I applaud you so much because there's so much self-awareness that you have and humility and the go-getter of like, all right, like let me go find someone that can help me with this. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna get into it, but I definitely feel like that was a big thing for me coming into the coaching program. And also, um, one of my roadblocks, I think, about like moving forward was definitely, do I still want to marry him? Like, is this
Mm-hmm.
someone that I want to spend my life with? Is this the type of marriage I want to have? And I think that it's actually, in hindsight, like I'm so grateful he told me before we got married because okay, I think I'm gonna go into
Let's
storytelling
do
mode
it. Let's do
now.
it. Go ahead.
um so I think so he told me everything when we were about a year into our relationship. And when we first started dating, I was like, I don't want to be someone who's dating someone for a long time, just for like my personal beliefs. And I just wanted to, get to know him a little bit and then move forward towards getting married.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me all of this about a year into our relationship. And then, that kind of just all went out the window. And like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we're not gonna think about getting married. We need to focus on this. And he was just also going through a lot. And when he told me this, I think it was about 2 months into him starting therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And that also had been like, I gave him an ultimatum because we were kind of fighting all the time. And there was just a lot, like, our relationship felt very unstable, you can say. We were just fighting about everything all the time, especially about the future. And I came to a point where I said to him, you need to either actually start working on yourself, or I don't think I can do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So he started therapy, and 2 months later, he told me all of this. And then I say that, like, I think that's when our relationship really started. because I feel like it just went to no more kind of hiding behind anything.
Mm,
Just he put everything out there. And then I feel like I was also holding back for that first year. I don't know if it was kind of going off of feeling that he's holding back, but in taking responsibility for myself, I think I was holding back because of my own fears. And I feel
sure.
when C told me everything, we both just really started being ourselves. And I think that was the first thing. One of the first things was, okay, like, is this? I don't think I, in that moment, considered actually breaking up with him. I think it was, of course, I was so angry, I was so upset, but I
Mhm.
think one of the thoughts that came to me was he's finally being honest. He's
Mm,
finally um actually working on himself. I felt him telling me everything to be a part of him trying to work on himself and be honest. And so I didn't like in that moment think, okay, I need to break up with him. But then the thought came back in not that I should break up with him, but is this the type of marriage I want? Is this the type of
right.
relationship I want? Um, and so what he told me, right? So first he told me about the porn addiction. And then of course, like a lot of like the upset, like my relationship is not what I thought it was. And
Mm,
but then he said, I have something. Actually, I asked him, is there anything else?
mm,
And he said, yes, there's something else. And he didn't want to tell me right away. So I think he ended up telling me the following day. But there was also some infidelity in
mhm.
that first year. So for me, I think the porn addiction took a back seat for over a year because
Mhm,
I was kind of trying to focus on the infidelity part of it.
mhm,
Because in that moment, it just felt like maybe that hurt more, or I was more angry about that.
mhm.
And so many fights, so much, so much went on for that 1 year. And I think it really started kind of getting better when we did this one couples therapy book. And so we were just kind of, talking about stuff. We were getting a little bit better, getting past that. But then I asked him, like, I think I asked him, so how are you doing with recovery? Because he had been telling me that he'd been, kind of dealing with recovery along with the process of us processing his infidelity. But I don't know, I can't compare the two situations, but I feel
Mhm,
like those are like two really big moments for me where,
mhm.
yes, I had known about the addiction, but I don't think I ever sat down and gave it thought until like a year and a half later when I asked him, so how's recovery going?
Uh-huh. Yes.
And then that kind of started everything in
Else.
terms of
Yes.
me dealing with recovery.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that. I think this is a really great point because a lot of times it's very, not very common, but it does happen, right? Where I have podcast listeners or clients where there is some infidelity or there's something that in our brains is bigger, right? And our brain will do that, right? When we have, and that's what it's designed to do, it helps us survive. So when we have emotionally, I don't want to say traumatic because that's the word everybody uses, but we'll use it just because that's what people use, right? Emotionally traumatic experiences, right? Or an experience that I would say brings up a lot of emotion when there's multiple pieces of facets of information coming at you. You're like, okay, I just found out that my husband or whoever, right? I just found out that the person I'm with, there was some infidelity, so there was some cheating, but then there's also a pornography addiction. Whichever one is creating more of an emotional uproar, so to speak, that is the one that your brain is going to focus on. It's going to say, okay, let's take a back seat to everything else for a minute and let's focus on this. It's kind of like, I don't know why I always think of physical getting hurt when I'm talking to you. It's like these physical examples, probably because you're a doctor. Okay. It's because like, okay, so let's say you broke your arm and like you were in a car accident, right? When you come up on somebody who's been like has physical pain and has some damage, the first thing you're going to do is that you're going to assess what is the most important that we look at immediately. We're like, all right, let's check for internal bleeding. Let's make sure all your organs are functioning, right? And if one of those organs isn't functioning, that's what you're going to do. And you're going to like, let's worry about stitches later. Let's worry about like the sprained ankle later. We're going to worry about this bigger thing, this bigger hurt. And that's what our brain does. So this makes complete sense. So this is what happened, right? We have an automatic survival response and your brain's like, all right, what's causing the most pain? Let's focus on that. Everything else can take a back seat for a minute until you're in a space where you can actually process it. And then you're like, okay, internal organs are good. Biggest pain is wrapped up, taken care of. We're looking at that. Now what? And that's when the secondary stuff pops up. Not that it's secondary and that it doesn't matter as much, just for the sake of the example, if that made sense.
100%. And I feel like it almost, I had gotten to a point where I felt like, okay, I think I'm getting over the infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
But I think once everything with recovery started coming up, in my mind there was a connection because some of the infidelity was related to recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And even despite that, it created a lot of the same feelings.
Yes.
And I think that's what it was. And you know, of course, one of the biggest things that you teach is how to sit down and process those feelings. So I think what I realized is, oh, I'm thinking of the physical examples too. I had put maybe band-aids. I had
Yes.
put band-aids on a lot of the wounds, but I didn't stitch them up. I didn't let them heal.
Yes.
And I think again goes to that one roadblock I had because I think I was at a point where I was okay, we've worked with infidelity, maybe we can move forward now, maybe we can think about
Right.
getting married now. And then all of this comes up and I just got like so upset because I was okay, we still can't get married. Like
Mm-hmm.
this, I don't, there was just such a roadblock for me for
Mm-hmm.
such a long time. And I know that's one of the first things I said to you. I was like, we've been together. I would like us to move forward, but I just feel like I can't.
Right.
And you know, I had this timeline in my head,
Yes, you
and
did. I'm
so I,
behind and my life
yeah,
schedule and my life plan. Yes.
I remember I said to you, Jolene, I would like to get married within like a year and a couple months, but I would like for him to be clean for a year
Mm-hmm.
before we get married. And even saying that, I'm like, okay, well, you get that doesn't like sound very realistic, right? You're giving a year and a year to both things. Um, and I think one of the biggest things that you had me do was first understanding boundary versus consequence,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then is that a boundary? Is that a consequence? And am I why am I trying to have this 1 year timeline?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that that was one of my biggest breakthroughs where I realized, and this came with the process. It didn't come right away. This came a couple months into coaching with you, right? After I had started working on everything, after I had kind of really sat with a lot of the feelings. But I came to a point where I said to myself, okay, say he's not clean for a year, right? Are you actually going to leave him? Are you actually going to walk away from this relationship? And I think the answer to me was, no, I'm probably not,
Mm-hmm.
because I still care about him and he is trying. And so then I had to, you know, I had multiple conversations with you about this, and you were like, so you need to decide, like, are you in this or are you not in this, right? Like, are you consciously making the decision to stay in this relationship? And I think I it took a while, but I think I decided that I want to be with this person. And if it takes 1 year, if it takes 2 years, okay, say it and I break up with him a year later,
Mm-hmm.
and then I find out that, oh, he like got clean, right? And then what, am I gonna go back to him?
Right.
And like, are we just gonna be that couple that's going back and forth, like on and off? Which was, I was okay. I was like, you realize that that doesn't make any sense, right? Like, you clearly want to be with this person, you love him. So yeah, I decided that kind of timeline was not very realistic, and it wasn't like I was going to break up with him in a year and then go get married to the next person I found like a couple months
Mm-hmm.
later, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't just going to jump into another relationship. I wasn't just going to be ready to get married. It's not it's not just about getting married. It's about, this is the person that I
Mm-hmm.
love, that I
Mm-hmm.
want to be with.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're bringing this up. I want to make a quick point here because this is something that so many women struggle with. They say things like, okay, we're going to set this type of boundary, or if he can show me that he can be clean for whatever amount of time it is, whether it's 3 months or 6 months. And for you, it was a year. And really the point, ladies, of me pushing back on this for everybody who's listening and thinking the same thing as she is right now. And it's like, yeah, I want that timeline. Like I want him to show that he is committed, right? Whatever it is, that's the thought. But then you have this arbitrary time that you've chosen. And it's just some random time. Like for Ghazal, it was a year. Maybe you've said 6 months. Maybe you've said 3. And the whole point is to push back. Why not 90 days? Why not 6 days? Why not 3 hours? Like, why did you choose that time? And what if it doesn't happen? And it's very important to do this on purpose, to do this consciously, which is what she was talking about, because most often this is just running arbitrarily in the background. This is just some kind of subconscious thought that we think that this timeline, if they can be clean for this long, means that that's when it's going to show me that they're committed. And if they can show me they're committed, then I'll be committed. That's when you're making your decisions based off the other person's actions, which is not how we want to show up. Because again, that just leaves us waiting for him to like get his act together for however long we think he should before we decide that we're all in. And that's the decision I want you to make on purpose. So whether you decide you're in or out, you do it on purpose and you know why and you like your reasons, and don't base it off of a timeline that you don't even realize is just completely made up in your head.
And then it goes to, why do you have the timeline, or why do you have any of this, right? And for me, it was, I don't want to deal with this
Yes.
any longer than a year, right? I
Yes.
don't want to, um, but then you're like, what does that mean? What do you mean you don't want to deal with it, right? And I said, I don't want to deal with the feelings that come with it.
Right.
And then I just have this automatic thought, and not thought, I just have this automatic reminder in my head in Jolene's voice now. Okay, so what happens when you feel some feelings, right? Like you just feel them, and then you kind of work with it, right? I know there's so much more that goes into that. There's so much more that we learn in the coaching that goes into that. But what's the worst that can happen? You have some feelings and then you feel them. And it's a lot easier said than done, and it took me you saying it like 100 times for me to actually get that. And I still need you to say it over and over.
It's okay. I have to tell
But
myself that too, so it's fine.
yeah. But it was I remember I listened to one of your podcasts with Rob, and I don't remember which one of you it was, but or maybe it was both of you, that said that the first couple months are the most impactful, the first couple months of starting coaching. And I really see that. I feel like those first 3 months, I became a completely different person. I'm still learning. I'm still going through stuff. I still come to you for stuff, maybe not as often as I did in those first 3 months, but I learned so much in those first 3 months. And it not only affects talking about recovery, but it affects every other aspect of our relationship, and it affects my other relationships
Mm.
with my family, my friends. I feel like I have one of the other biggest, I guess, breakthroughs was, how do I want to show up in my relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of the things that really bothered me about this whole process in general. I didn't like being someone who was angry all the time. I didn't like being someone who was yelling at him all the time, not appreciating anything kind he did for me.
Yes.
And he did a lot. I feel like he has been very understanding towards my process. He's the one who encouraged me to go to coaching. He's the one who is always, take some time for yourself, do this, do that. And I think I was refusing. I would get mad at him. I remember when I first found out about you through him, because
Mm.
I think you did a Zoom session or a podcast. I remember there being a video recording. And he said, I just listened to this person who runs a group for the partners, for the wives, and I think we've been going about this whole thing wrong. And
Mm.
I was so angry at those words. I was like, what do you mean we've been doing this wrong? Like, do you know how much work I put into this? How hard this has been for me? Like, how
Mhm.
how could you say we've been doing this wrong?
Mhm.
Um, but then I listened to the recording. I listened to the video, and I was like, maybe he's right. Maybe we have
I
been
hate
doing
when
this
they're
wrong.
right. Oh man.
Maybe we have been doing this wrong because I think that was the thing that we were going through at that point where he is being understanding, he is trying,
Mhm.
and I was just not giving him any grace, any
Mhm.
credit for trying, there was no positivity on my end
Sure.
towards it. And I think one of the things that you said, well, you said a lot of things in that recording, but one of the things that was really the essence of the entire program is until you're in an emotionally kind of aware and stable place yourself, you cannot show up for your partner,
Mhm.
right? And
100%.
I think, yeah, and I think for me, I didn't like being someone who was yelling at him all the time, who was angry at him all the time. I didn't even realize this and well into the coaching program that that's one of the things that bothered me. But I think that's one of the things that stuck out to me the first time I heard you talk. It was, I'm not like emotionally okay. And
Mhm.
until I am emotionally okay, there's no way um I can even talk to him about this,
Right.
because it was this I I steer away from saying this now, but at that moment it felt like I couldn't handle it,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, I think I needed to work on myself to be able to talk to him at all.
Yeah.
Not even just about recovery, honestly, at all, about
Mhm.
anything.
Yes.
And again, it's not like an instant thing. It's not like a one coaching call and you learn how to do it. That took a lot of time. It took those first couple months, and I think it's still a work in process. I think I still have to be aware. Um, am I like processing my feelings? Am I, coming to him into the conversation actually ready to talk about this instead of
Mhm.
forcing myself to talk about it, or just talking about it just for the sake of talking about it, which I
Right.
think I did a lot. I did a lot.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that you bring this up because what happens most of the time when we have emotions that we don't know how to deal with, the only way that we know that that's what's happening is by the result it's creating, right? It's like, I don't know what's going on. I just can't stop yelling at my kids. I don't know what's going on. I just can't stop getting in fights with my husband. I don't know what's going on. It's just that I like cringe when my mom calls me, right? It's like, we just see the result because we don't totally know what's going on internally that's creating it, and we think it's the other person. We think it's just because our kids won't listen, or because our husband's watching porn, or because our mom calls incessantly and doesn't know when to stop, right? We think it's them, but what's actually happening is there's so much emotion inside of us that we don't know how to handle. We don't know what to deal with, how to deal with it, right? How to handle it, like you said, which is why it's so crucial to learn how to process all of it and how to become where you're in charge of your brain and your emotions, so that then you can act in a way that you choose, rather than saying, I don't know what's going on. But I don't like that I'm showing up this way. I don't like that I'm showing up with my spouse this way. I feel like I'm always picking a fight. Why is that? And I love that you brought that up too. It's like, I couldn't even see the positive things he was doing. I was like so consumed and so angry and upset and frustrated and annoyed at this man that even all the nice things he was doing, I couldn't appreciate, which is how we get, right? Because we get so full of bitterness and resentment and anger and hurt and betrayal and all of those things that we don't even want to recognize the good that he did, because we feel like it invalidates the negative pain that we feel. And we're scared of that. We're scared when we don't understand our thoughts and our feelings. We're very afraid to acknowledge the positive because we think that it means that we are dismissing the hurt. And that's not what happens. And it's such an important thing to learn so that you can accept the positive, process the negative, let it go, and move forward.
Yeah, and I think one of the other so I listened to that recording you had, and then I knew I wanted to sign up for your program, but I didn't have the money yet. So I had to wait until my student loan came in. So I listened to that recording, and then for a few months I requested the loan, and for a few months I just listened to your podcasts. I just went through them, starting from number one, and I came to two realizations just from the podcasts. And the first was that this was during the podcast Asking Yourself Why, I think.
That's a good one.
And I was listening to it, yes. I kept asking myself why, and I came to the biggest thought I came to was I had a fear of him leaving me. And then one of the other things that came up was I didn't like that we weren't talking about it. Even though I didn't want to talk about it, and anytime we talked about it, it turned into a fight, right? But I didn't know how to work on that second thought until I started the coaching program. But just the realization of the first thought, I was like, okay, I really, really need to do this coaching program, because I've had that thought, but again, I didn't know what to do with it. And I remember sharing the thought with him, but what do you do with the thought? And I used to tell myself the story that it's because of that first year we had together, right? I felt like he had one foot out the door the entire time. But that's not taking responsibility for the fact that I do have that thought, and I do have the feelings that go with it. And that is a genuine fear that I had. And then the second thing was the communicating with him. And I don't think I even knew where to begin with that, but I think after working on it, what I came to was having a connection with him, right? It's not necessarily that we have to talk about every little thing in his recovery, or every time he relapses, or everything that he's going through. I think for me, I just wanted to feel close to him, because fighting all the time, you're not close. You're actually both probably feeling very lonely, because you have absolutely no connection with each other. And it's funny because it actually took us not talking about anything recovery related for a couple months. And then I started recovery, and then I would come to you and say, he doesn't want to talk to me about it. I don't understand why he doesn't want to talk to me about it. And you would say to me, of course he doesn't want to talk to you about it. He's feeling a lot of feelings to talk to you about it. And the other thing, that when I ended up speaking to him about it, he was scared to talk to me, because anytime he spoke about it, I was just yelling at him. So I think I had to communicate, and he was like, how are you just suddenly, like, I remember him saying this to me. He said, you've been in this program for 2 months. You can't tell me that you're just suddenly okay with talking about it, right? And I was like, okay, yes, that's fair. I know I've only been in the program for 2 months. But I didn't even want to talk to him about him as much as I just wanted to share things with him. And even in sharing things with him, he would just be so quiet. And I just started getting so upset, because I felt like he didn't want to talk to me. And then my mind would go to, he doesn't trust me. He doesn't want to be with me. He doesn't want to have anything to do with me. And then the thought that you offered was, well, he is choosing to be with you. He is choosing to be here. It's my fear that he doesn't want to be with me, but he is willingly being here. So then, and I think this is something we're still working on, like learning how to communicate about recovery. I think it started with, for like a couple months, honestly, me just sharing things I learned in coaching, me sharing thoughts that I'm having, me sharing just kind of everything I was going through. And then eventually he started opening up a little bit about what he was learning in coaching or podcasts he was listening to or things he was doing. And I think even right now, like, I don't think we know or we've come to kind of a consensus on how much we want to talk about every single relapse or everything like
Mm-hmm.
that. But I think we've come to a point where we are comfortable sharing the process with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And for now, I think that is okay to be
Mm-hmm.
here. Um, because he's still, he's still going through his own process, and I'm still going through stuff. Um, and I think I was so overly after fighting and then not talking about it for a couple months. I was just pushing to talk about it so much where he wasn't ready to share with me. And that doesn't mean he doesn't want to be with me. He just wasn't ready to share.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we slowly started working on it, and it's still a work in process. But I just needed to stop putting so much pressure on myself to get him to talk to me because I was making it mean something.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love this. Yes. And this is such a good point again to bring up because most of us, again, when we don't know what's going on in our brains and we aren't fully aware of all the subconscious fears that we have that are driving us, then we're just like, I just want to talk about it. And it feels really important. And then we get upset if he doesn't want to talk about it. But what's actually coming up and I remember coaching with you on this. You were like, well, I really want to talk to him about this. And I'm like, great. Why? And then we would uncover that you're like, well, I just really want to know how he's doing. Great. Why? Right. And we'd come up with all of these things. And you'd be like, okay, well, apparently secretly there's some subconscious thought inside of me that is worried that if he doesn't talk about it, then maybe he'll be more likely to relapse or whatever it is, which is what our brain does. Or maybe if he's not sharing it with me, it means he doesn't trust me or whatever. Our brain will often have some kind of sneaky thought, which I've talked about before, a sneaky thought or a sneaky belief that's kind of hidden under these really beautiful phrases and ideas, these pretty little packages that our brain like sneaks other things under there. And when we're not fully aware of it, then that's when we have ulterior motives when we go into conversations, which is only a problem because then we have the conversation or we start having the conversation. And then if it doesn't start going the way that we want it to, or we don't get the affirmation that we want, or we don't feel any better like we thought we would, then we react and we get defensive and we start picking a fight because our brain thinks that something has gone wrong. So that's why it's so important when you want to improve your communication just to look inward, which seems like you want to just look outward. It's like, I think we don't communicate well. Why? Because he's not doing it frequently enough. If only he would talk more, then our problem would be solved, right? But that's never how it works. It always starts inward. I love it.
And I remember you asked me, like, well, what do you expect? How often do you want him to talk about it? Or what do you want him to talk about? And I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because
All I know is that
I,
whatever he's doing is wrong.
yeah.
Exactly.
And I remember you saying this, you were like, poor guy. You have this expectation of him and you don't even know what the expectation is.
I know. And I say that with all the love, you guys, because that's what happens is our brains just our brain really does have our best interest at heart, but sometimes it can't figure itself out. And then we put these expectations on our spouse or on our boyfriend, and we don't even know what they are. And we do this to ourselves too. We'll have an expectation for ourselves to be a good mom or a good student. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And we don't even know. We just know we're not reaching it.
Yeah. Um, okay, so going back to more roadblocks or
Yes.
more breakthroughs. So, I think once I started asking myself all of these questions, and so I think one of the most important things that I learned from you was, the model and the fact that his actions do not cause my feelings,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think I did I did the model like a couple times, like, and it just kind of really made sense to me, the model. And especially when you draw it out, like, I know you draw it out twice and then you
Uh-huh.
write his action on one side and then
Uh-huh.
my feeling on the other side.
Yes.
And it just like just visually seeing it, it's not even the same model. It's two
Mm-hmm.
separate models. Right? So that really helped because it helped me understand that he doesn't control my feelings, right?
Yes.
No one else controls my feelings. My thoughts control my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And um how am I going to work on my thoughts? How am I going to change my thoughts? How am I going to process my feelings? That was very, very powerful to gain control of the situation,
Mm-hmm.
which is funny because you're trying to control the situation anyway, but you're kind of doing it wrong. You
Yes.
think by having all of these things, like talking about it, or tracking his devices, or doing this and doing that, you have control over the situation. But you actually don't have any control over that. What you have control over is your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
and your feelings. And again, still a work in process, right? This is not something that you just realize once and kind of go through. And so that was the basis, I think, of everything. That once I started questioning myself, why does this bother me? Why do I have this thought, or why do I have this feeling? And keeping all of that in mind, I think the two next big things that came for me were the relationship between sex and porn,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it was one of the podcasts that you and Rob did together that just really stuck with me, where I remember him explaining, and you had spoken about this before too, but for some reason, sometimes certain things just click, right?
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
remember him, yeah, I remember him saying that when your partner is watching porn, they are not feeling pleasure afterwards. They're most likely feeling guilt. They're most likely trying to avoid a feeling,
Mm-hmm.
which is the concept of buffering that you talk about. But when your partner is having sex with you, it does lead to pleasure. It does lead to connection. It does lead to a different experience. And I think in my mind, separating those two experiences was almost like a really big weight being lifted off of my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's where I was connecting the infidelity, and that's where I was connecting all of these things in my mind, and just not being able to get past this fact that, like, my partner is turning elsewhere, or
Mm.
um I didn't even think he was connecting with someone else. I knew he was not connecting with these women, but just even the thought of him seeing any other woman, or
Yes.
him seeking anything,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and just realizing that separation in my mind and really sitting with that. 'Cause I remember I came to you and I'm like, Jolene, I just had this realization. What do I do now? And you're like, just sit with it. And I think I was just in overdrive at that point of like, okay, what can I do? Like, what's everything
Yes.
I can do? Right. Um, so that was a really big thing. And then I think the other big thing for me, which actually someone else in the group brought up, and that's how I worked through that, was I realized I started questioning the idea of love, like
Mm.
the meaning of love, and what does it mean to love someone. And I think this had kind of come up before I started the coaching programs. And it was one of the podcasts you did on definitions. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember I had kind of written down the words that I feel like I needed to, maybe the definitions bothered me or I didn't like the definitions. And I remember love was one of them. And I remember thinking, but not giving any attention to this thought until it came up in a coaching call. What does loving someone mean to me? And then I would think, do I actually love this person?
Mm.
Because I think I wasn't doing what I thought a person should do when they love someone,
Ooh, interesting.
right? So to me, the definition of love was caring for someone and thinking about their well-being before your own when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to them or the relationship. And I thought that I was making it about myself and not caring about him at all. And so, do I really love him if I value my feelings and what I'm going through over him? And this
Interesting.
idea, yes, and this idea of unconditional love, right? Like
Yeah.
loving the person no matter what, right? And
Mhm.
so, does that no matter what include the porn addictions? Do I love
Mhm.
him in spite of that or despite that? And along with that went, is this the type of person I want to love, right?
Mhm.
Because we all think that a person's actions are a reflection of who they are.
Right.
And I remember we were having this conversation in the coaching call, and you said a person's actions are not a reflection of who they are, but what they're going through in the moment. And I was like, hmm,
Mm-hmm.
wow,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we all do things that me showing up the way I didn't want to in my relationship doesn't mean that's who I am. It
Yes.
was just what I was going through in the moment,
Yes.
right? And then it went back to the love thing because I was questioning, is this the type of person, a person with this actions? Is this someone I could love? Is this
Yeah.
someone I do love? And what does it mean to love someone?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it first I like had to sit down and realize, okay, I do love him. I do very much care for him. So maybe there's something wrong with my definition of love, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's just not currently aligning with what we're going through,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I can choose to show up how I want to show up, the way that I think I should when I love someone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that doesn't mean I am okay with it. That doesn't mean I'm never going to be angry or upset, but it's this idea of um cognitive dissonance, I think,
Yes.
where you can both love someone and not agree with something,
Yes.
or and I think that was such a powerful coaching call because these two ideas came up, and it was just kind of like just someone brought it up out of nowhere, and I hadn't even realized that these were I had realized they were on the back of my mind, but I didn't really think about it. And then
Mm-hmm.
it was another thing that was a second moment of a weight being lifted off my shoulder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it just goes to say, you always say choose your thoughts, right? You get to choose your thoughts. You can have a
Mm-hmm.
thought and a feeling, but then you get to choose it. And I think I wasn't okay with the thoughts I was choosing, and I didn't even realize it until I had a new thought that I liked better.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, I love this.
yes.
Oh,
Hmm.
I love that. I love that you brought this up. This is so fascinating. That's the word I always use. So fascinating because this is one of the things that I love about our group is because not only because it's so supportive, but two, because I think a lot of people worry that stuff will get brought up on the calls that will make them worse, right? They're like, I don't know, I'm really worried about coming on these calls and someone brings something up and then I'm triggered and then it's worse. But the beauty about these calls, one is that even if somebody brings something up that is difficult for you, it's the best place for it to come up. Because if it doesn't come up today in a coaching call surrounded by people who love you and are doing the same thing and a coach who can help you work through it, it's going to come up when you're at your husband's work Christmas party or the next time you sit down to watch a movie and something comes on, right? Like there are all of these other times that it's going to come up. And most of the time, the beauty of it is that it's going to bring something up that all it is an opportunity for you to become aware. And then you get to decide what you're going to do with it. You can decide whether you're going to keep it or whether you're going to let it go and whether you choose to keep thinking it or you like something better. And that's the most awesome part that I love that you brought up. You were like, I didn't even realize there was a better thought. I didn't even realize that I was thinking this thought until someone offered me one that I liked better. It's amazing. I love it. So good. All right. What else
And
did you want to
yeah.
share?
Ooh, okay. The one thing, um, is joining the group.
Hmm.
I think I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about this.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one thing. I remember we had our consultation call, and I remember just telling you everything and crying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you maybe asked me why I was crying or kind of what was coming up. And I said, I've never spoken to anyone about this. I've never shared this with anyone. And it just brought up so much emotion, a lot of negative emotion to be sharing it, but also relief to be able to share it with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go into a coaching call, the difference between telling a friend or telling someone in your life is that you have to explain to them what you're going through. You
Mm-hmm.
have to explain to them why it bothers you. You have to
Mm-hmm.
explain to them why it's bringing up certain feelings, even the feelings that it is bringing up. But when we go into this Zoom coaching call, you never have to explain yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You never have to justify anything. You never have to tell a whole backstory first, that the way that you would to a new person. You just kind of walk in there and you say how you're feeling, and that's just the way it is. And everyone is so supportive. Everyone is just there for you and listening or sending supportive messages. And even in our Slack, so many times people share just they're having
Mm-hmm.
a bad day or something happens, and a couple people will always be like, I'm so sorry for what you're going through, or I understand what you're going through. And even if I still feel like I can't tell people in my life, it doesn't bother me as much because I know that when I'm going through something, I can just go to a coaching call and people will
Mm-hmm.
just understand and
Mm-hmm.
be there.
Yeah, there's something so powerful in that just breaks the isolation, right? We get so isolated going through this experience because most of the time we're not communicating with our spouse very well, and we're not talking really to anybody else about it. And so our brain feels very isolated. And the problem when your brain feels isolated is then it also feels defeated. And it feels like there's no way out. And so I think that's one of the most beautiful things about breaking that in your brain. It's one of the reasons why I started coaching in groups rather than just one-on-one, was because it's so powerful for your brain to start breaking up with the isolation, because then it means you can start fighting it and you can start moving forward, because it's not just you fighting it. It's like now you have a team. Now you have a coach and you have a team, and there's more than just you battling this. And if there's more than just you, then you're not by yourself and you're stronger, and you have a whole support system to be there for you on days when all you want to do is just sit on the floor and like eat ice cream. And they're like, yeah, totally. I get it. I did that yesterday. And so you don't feel quite so alone. And here's the other thing that people bring up, and I don't remember if you brought this up, is that everyone's like, I feel like I'm going crazy. Am I crazy? Am I overreacting? Am I making this bigger than it needs to be? And that's all the second guessing and the self-judgment that we do, is just something that when you hear other people going through it, you're like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not overreacting. There's nothing wrong with me. It's okay. Everything that I'm experiencing is fine and can be solved and worked through, and it's not a problem. And that's just so relieving.
Yeah, 100%. Just that I am not crazy. Other people think the
Yeah.
same way. There's not something wrong with me to be upset about this.
Yes, 100%. All right, my dear, anything else you wanted to share with all the ladies listening to you right now?
That you guys can do this too.
I love that. Thank you for coming on today and sharing your story. This was so beautiful and so brave of you and such a huge step. And I'm just like so proud of you. And I'm so honored to just be like a little part and to share everything that I can with you, to see you just take it and go. It's just a beautiful thing to see. I'm so proud of you. So thank you so much for coming on today. I know this will be exactly what somebody needed to hear. So thank you.
So thank you, Jolie.